Recent studies show 1/3 of 18 to 24-year-old men have no sexual activity over the course of the whole year. So they made this study, they went to men aged 18 to 24 and asked them, did you have any sexual activity within the last year? 30% or even 33%, so one third said no. For women, the number rose to 19%, which is quite a big difference to 33% in men. But it is quite surprising, isn't it? Because usually you would expect the culture is developing in a more liberal way. There used to be way more stereotypes about sexuality and all of those things. And today we have all the freedom to date casually and whatever. People are having less sex and they're having trouble finding a romantic partner, supposedly, because usually if you have a romantic partner you have sex too. So sure, there's some fundamentalist people who don't agree with me on this, but I would say on average somebody who has a romantic partner has regular sexual activity. So what is the reason for this? And I think it's not very easy to answer. I think one reason is that sociological data indicates that as our culture has become more equalized in the West, that you eliminate cultural differences between men and women, right? That's basically what we're doing in the West, right? And you would think that men and women behave in the same way, but they don't. And so what happens is you maximize biological differences as a result. And biologically, so just to make that once again clear, if you minimize cultural differences, you maximize biological differences. And I think the literature in this is very clear. So it's at least what Jordan Peterson says, so it must be true. But I think that biologically for men, promiscuity is more advantageous than for women. So let's say you have a guy and he has 3 sexual partners, then you have 2 men who have none, right? Because we're more or less 50% men and women, and that means 2 men don't get any women at all. Of course, there's not many men who have multiple sexual partners, so most definitely don't, but there is a tiny percentage of men who have multiple sexual partners, and these make the statistic develop in a way. But I think this can only partly be the reason, because for women, it developed in the same manner. That's kind of strange, right? Because if you say biological differences maximize, I mean, the women should have more desire to be sexually active if there's so it's kind of not clear why that is. I think one is that people are less socially skilled these days, right? So you had Corona and all of that, and that really made a big decision, that had a very big influence in dating and the whole social system. So I know people that have the same behavior they had during Corona, and they're having trouble to get out of their behavioral pattern. So they stay in the same behavior, and then obviously you're less social, and then you meet less people, and then you're going to have less chances of meeting a sexual partner. I think another reason is that social media has risen the expectations for a potential sexual partner. So we all see the most popular and most attractive people off the planet 24/7 on our phones. And I think this has a negative impact on men and women. So men think that every woman they meet in reality should look like, Kylie Jenner, and the women think that they should have superstar actors who want to go on a date with them. But obviously for both of these, that's not the case. Then as well, there's a big social change on the front of marriage. So I think in the past it was very common to have marriage and then you had sex. So pretty old now, but it used to be like this, and then you just had one partner you spent your life with, and then with these guys you had sexual activity. Yeah, I think another one is feminism, because optimally what feminism did is that a lot of men feel insecure now about their sexuality and about their aggressiveness. And I think what women don't get is that as a man, if you're in the dating market, it's very competitive, right? So for example, if I go out and I talk to wrong woman, there's going to be a chance I get attacked from the guy who's with her, for example. So, and even if there's no guy with her, he might be around the corner. So there's always a risk involved if you approach women. In order to still have the courage to do that, you have to have a certain level of this male competition desire and male aggressiveness to go for it anyhow and then be ready to fucking fight. I mean, it sounds kind of stupid, but it's true. I mean, you know how many times I got attacked because I spoke to some girl, sometimes just asking for a cigarette or banal things like that, and then the guy literally hit me for nothing, right? I didn't hit on her or nothing. And that's something that doesn't happen to women that much. Of course, it happens to women too, not nearly as much as it happens to men. Right? So as I said in another video, men are the major victims of violence, and most violence crime are jealousy crimes. Most homicides are jealousy crimes from other men. So there's a lot of sexual motivation when it comes to aggressiveness of violent crimes, right? So you just have to look back at Sigmund Freud, where he was one of the first who made the connection between aggression and sexuality, and then it becomes very clear why these two are interconnected. Okay, so then you have men, and they have the need to have a certain level of aggression and competitiveness to find a partner. I mean, you're not able to, I will promise you that, if you don't have a certain level of readiness to assert yourself even when there's violent attacks possible. And you can only do that if you have a certain threshold of aggression and assertiveness. And the feminists, on the other hand, they tell you this male behaviors is toxic masculinity, right? They tell you, oh man, they're too aggressive, they're too dominant, they treat women like shit. Some even say that if you touch a woman on the arm, that's sexual harassment, which is, I seriously want to fucking punch people like this in the face. How is that ever sexual harassment, like ever? Like if a woman to a woman does that, probably like in a lesbian couple, is seen as a courageous and confident move to express their sexuality. And if a man does it, it's toxic masculinity. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous, right? Yeah, I think this is a big reason. And then if men, they become more passive in the courtship because they're too afraid to make a move where they might offend someone. So they have now two risks. They have the risk of being hurt by the person, like physically hurt. So for example, if they approach a woman and the guy who's the boyfriend is around, they have this risk. And now they also have the risk to be seen as a sexual predator or someone that is harassing women. And these combined, this is so much that I think some men, they just make the decision, okay, I'm not going to do shit. And that's what I did, certainly. And I'm not blaming culture or anything on it. It was my own, I was just being a coward. I was just being too anxious to do it. A lot of this was the reason that I wanted to respect women. I didn't want to make moves that could like be too much, or make a move in a situation where it wasn't appropriate. So that had a big influence on me. And I'm not saying that it's feminism's fault. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that these cultural narratives, they're having a very big influence on how men behave. And ultimately, because men and women differ in their sexual mating strategies, women, they tend to be less invested. So if you have no relationship, the woman is not going to come up to you. She expects you to first make the move, because from a cultural perspective, it was always like this. And the second one is also, she can get pregnant and you cannot pregnant. So she has less investment than you. And that's why guys typically have to make the first moves, because a much lower price to pay for sexual activity. And now, of course, if the men become more passive and don't make moves and don't approach women, then women will have trouble finding a partner too. And that's the problem I see also with feminism, is that you create men who are so incompetent that they can't even approach a woman with this cultural narratives. Because what you should do is you should encourage men. You should go to them and say like, look, yes, you should approach that woman, even though if there's a threat of physical violence for you, but she might be the love of your life, so fuck it and go talk to her. And that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're teaching men that is inappropriate behavior. Just look at the Gillette commercial a couple of years ago, where literally a guy just wanted to approach a woman on the street and he was physically stopped. It's like, why? It makes no sense. So what if that was the love of his life, and then some just social justice warrior bitch is stopping him from talking to her? It makes zero sense. So I think these two are the main reasons. The one is that we have maximized biological differences and now promiscuity is more advantageous for more men and also more possible. And the second one is the cultural narrative that we teach men that it is something bad to be assertive or to pursue women. So if you feel lonely, if you're still alone, if you have a sexless life, you have to start rejecting just some of these cultural narratives. Otherwise, you're not going to get where you want to be. You have to start approaching women. You have to start asserting yourself, even in a situation where there's a risk involved, a risk that you might be seen as somebody who's harassing women, somebody that you're going into a situation where there's a physical risk involved. That's just the nature of being a guy with a physical risk. The other one, that you're going to be kicked out of places because of sexual harassment, is another thing that comes on top now, but you still have to risk it. And you have to also see that this cultural narrative from the feminists is a tiny proportion of people. So only 30% of women even today identify themselves as feminists, and I know why. I know from my own family why. That's why my mother is not a real feminist, why my girlfriend is absolutely not a feminist. It's because of exactly that reasons, because it's not good for women as well. It's not doing them any favor. So if you're still lonely, just see that there's a cultural part to this, and there's your own fault to it, because you might be lazy, you might not go actively out to approach women, and so that might be the reasons, but maybe now you understand it better. If you want to stop feeling alone and you want somebody to help you, I will put a link down there. You can book a consultation call with me. It's free. I'm going to reserve 2 hours on my calendar for you. We can have a conversation how I can help you. Thank you for watching, guys. See you.